She stood there, glowing in a silver gown. But that wasn't enough. "ID. Now," the officer barked, his hand near his gun. Monica Evans, an award-winning actress, froze as the cameras flashed. But what happened next, the crowd's reaction, the officer's downfall, would leave everyone speechless. "You don't belong here." It was a warm evening in Los Angeles, and the red carpet pulsed with life under the glow of 100 flashing cameras. A-list celebrities floated down the velvet path with practiced ease, their designer gowns and tailored suits cutting through the humid night air. Laughter mingled with the hum of eager reporters shouting questions over the din. The crowd on the other side of the barricades pushed forward, cell phones raised, hoping for a glimpse of Hollywood royalty. Among the parade of stars was Monica Evans, a rising African-American actress whose name had been on everyone's lips after her recent award-winning role. Monica moved with quiet confidence, her silver gown catching the light and shimmering with each step. Her long, natural curls framed her face, and her eyes, outlined in subtle, smoky shadow, scanned the crowd with calm composure. Cameras turned toward her, bulbs flashing in rapid succession as murmurs of admiration rippled through the press line. She smiled softly, poised and unshaken. Just as Monica approached the red carpet, a tall, imposing white police officer in a crisp uniform stepped in front of her, hand raised like a barrier. His presence cut through the noise like a sharp blade. The press line fell quiet, eyes shifting toward the sudden disruption. "Excuse me, ma'am," the officer said, his tone flat and devoid of warmth. "I'm going to need to see some ID." Monica's smile faltered. Her brows pulled together as confusion flickered across her face. "What?" she asked. Her gaze darted toward the other celebrities gliding past security without issue, all white, all untouched. Jessica Malone, a blonde Oscar nominee, breezed by, tossing her hair over her shoulder. No one stopped her. No one asked her for ID. "You don't belong here," the officer said, his eyes narrowing beneath the brim of his hat. His words cut through Monica like ice. Monica's heart slammed painfully against her ribs. Heat flushed through her chest as a tight coil of anger formed beneath her skin. "Excuse me?" Her voice sharpened. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters leaned forward, sensing the scent of scandal. "I work here," Monica said, her voice steady despite the pressure building behind her eyes. "I was invited." "ID," Officer Hughes repeated, his hand drifting toward the holster on his hip. The subtle motion sent a ripple of tension through the air. Monica's eyes darkened. Her pulse roared in her ears. "You're kidding, right?" "Ma'am, I'm not going to ask again." His voice hardened, and his stance widened. His hand didn't move from the holster. Monica's jaw clenched. She could feel the weight of the crowd's gaze pressing into her back. A dangerous cocktail of anger and humiliation burned beneath her skin. Her fingers curled tightly around her clutch. The cameras were still flashing, capturing every moment of this humiliation, this public questioning of her right to exist in this space. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Her chest tightened and her breath quickened. Monica took a sharp step forward, locking eyes with Hughes. "You don't belong here." Her voice was low, cutting. Hughes' mouth twitched, his jaw tightening as he squared his shoulders. The cameras were still rolling, and the weight of what was happening settled thickly in the air. Somewhere in the crowd, a reporter whispered, "Oh my God, is that Monica Evans?" A muscle in Hughes's jaw flexed. His hand hovered near his holster. Monica didn't flinch. She stood her ground. The flash of the cameras reflected in her eyes as the tension between them thickened into something sharp, dangerous. Monica's hands trembled as she opened her clutch, her fingers brushing against the cold metal clasp. Her breath hitched as she pulled out her ID and handed it to Hughes, her hand shaking slightly despite her effort to stay composed. Hughes took it with a sharp jerk of his hand, his gaze hard and calculating as he studied the small plastic card. His eyes narrowed, mouth twisting into a smirk that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You sure this isn't fake?" he muttered, his tone low but cutting enough to carry through the tense silence. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd like a wave crashing against concrete. Faces in the crowd turned toward them, eyes wide with disbelief and growing anger. The tension that had been simmering beneath the surface now threatened to boil over. Reporters pushed closer, microphones extended, cameras shifting focus from the other celebrities to the scene unfolding at the edge of the red carpet. A reporter stepped forward, adjusting his press badge. "Officer, she's Monica Evans. She's one of tonight's nominees." His tone was sharp, laced with disbelief. Hughes's eyes flicked toward the reporter with a sneer. "I don't care if she's the damn Queen of England," he snapped. "You know how many scams we get around here?" Monica's chest tightened painfully. Her pulse thudded against her ribs, fast and uneven. A knot of rage and humiliation twisted in her throat as the blood rushed in her ears. Her eyes burned, blurring the sea of faces staring at her, judging her, pitying her. Suddenly, Jessica Malone's sharp voice cut through the noise like a whip. "Hey! What the hell are you doing?" Jessica, still radiant from her interview just moments earlier, turned toward the scene. Her golden curls bounced as she strode toward Hughes, her eyes flashing with barely contained anger. "It's standard procedure," Hughes replied, his chin lifting as if daring her to challenge him. Jessica's lips curled into a dangerous smile. "No, it's not," she shot back, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You're singling her out because she's black." A new wave of murmurs rolled through the crowd, louder this time. The flashing of cameras intensified, now aimed squarely at Hughes and Monica. The dynamic of the scene had shifted. Monica was no longer just a celebrity caught in an awkward moment. She was now the center of a growing scandal. Monica stepped back, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The sting of humiliation made her skin prickle under the hot glare of the lights. "This is unbelievable," she whispered. Her voice cracked despite her effort to steady it. Hugh's mouth curled into a thin smile as he flicked her ID back at her. The card spun through the air before hitting the ground at her feet. "Next time, don't try to cut corners." Monica stared at him, her fists clenching at her sides. "You've got to be kidding me," she said, her voice trembling with barely restrained fury. "This isn't about security. This is about me." Her voice echoed through the tense silence. Hughes's face remained cold and impassive, but the growing intensity in the crowd's gaze made the muscles in his jaw twitch. The cameras kept flashing, capturing the raw injustice etched across Monica's face and the simmering arrogance in Hughes's eyes. The pressure in the air was thick enough to choke on, and Monica could feel it pressing down on her chest. The humiliation, the anger, the knowledge that everyone was watching, waiting to see what would happen next. Suddenly, the crowd surged forward. Reporters, celebrities, and photographers all turned toward Hughes with narrowed eyes and furrowed brows. "Let her go!" someone shouted. "This is disgusting!" another voice called. Jessica Malone stepped in front of Monica and pointed at Hughes. "You're done." "What are you talking about?" Hughes scoffed. "I'm just doing my job." "No," Jessica said. "You're being a racist asshole." Another celebrity, David Holland, took out his phone. "This is already trending. LAPD is gonna love this." "You can't be serious." "Smile for the cameras, officer," David said coldly. Flashes went off in Hughes's face. He turned to Monica, his face paling. "This is harassment," Monica said, stepping forward now. "And I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." Reporters swarmed them, shouting questions. "Officer Hughes, why did you single her out?" "Monica, how do you feel?" "Jessica, do you think the police department will respond?" Hughes's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He took a shaky step back and suddenly realized that his superior officer, Lieutenant Perry, was standing behind him, arms crossed. "Officer Hughes," Perry said sharply. "My office. Now." Hughes's mouth dropped open. "Sir, now." Later that night, Monica stood on stage holding her award for Best Actress. Her gown shimmered under the stage lights. The room was silent as she stepped toward the microphone. She took a deep breath. "I almost didn't make it to this stage tonight," she began. "Not because I wasn't invited, but because someone thought I didn't belong." The audience held its breath. "I'm standing here because I do belong. And so does every other person of color who's been told they're not enough, who's been made to feel invisible. We belong." The room erupted into applause. Jessica was on her feet, clapping. David whistled from the second row. "To Officer Hughes," Monica continued, "I hope you learned something tonight, because this," she held up her award, "is what belonging looks like." Monica walked off the stage to a standing ovation. As she left, she saw Hughes standing near the exit in plain clothes. His head was bowed. He wouldn't be wearing that uniform again. Outside, Monica smiled to herself. Hughes may have tried to erase her, but now the world had seen her, and they weren't going to forget.